so we have it. Just so I don't forget, I have this sign that says record because I have run things before, and about 5 minutes into it, I've realized that I haven't recorded it. So I have notes everywhere for things. So, all right. Okay. People coming in. All right. Just making sure that there's Stephanie. She's popping in. I think we're good. Hello, Stephanie Lee.
Good morning, friend. How are you?
Good. What's going on?
Good. Are you
Actually,
freezing? Are you freezing in that wintry forest?
my
I
I wish it was like this. It's about this color outside right now, but it's not it's not snowy. I was kind of hoping
I
it's snowy.
I
So,
know. We're looking at the same thing. I'm sitting with a heater under my table just to try to keep my legs warm because my studio is
do you have a
cold.
cold studio too? My
I
studio is
do.
freaking cold.
It's three cement walls and a cement floor, so it can
Yeah.
get pretty stinking cold in here. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in the office today, so yes, I'm nice and toasty, so that's good.
Yay.
All right.
Look,
Hey, I think I see your husband trying to sign in and see, watch
you
us. I think I
you
see,
do.
I do. He's sneaking in.
He is. He's getting a little lurking time before he goes out into his garage and probably plays with chainsaws. That's his current hobby. So
Yes, hopefully not outside your studio door, but
no. Yeah. I love to see all these names and faces.
I
Hello,
know it's a good
everyone. It's
turnout.
so good to see you.
So, should we start?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, I told everybody before you got here, I told everybody I just have everybody muted for the time being, and we can open it up to questions and ideas or whatever we want to do later. So, hey, you want to start? We haven't practiced this really. We sort of threw out some ideas about what we want to talk about in terms of solstice, and but we haven't really um, we haven't done a dress rehearsal on it or anything. So,
Yeah. Well, you and I are both, I think, pretty good at riffing on off the top of our heads, and then you put us together and look out. It can go on tangents, but you know what? What comes to mind for me as a good kicking off point is just a quick glimpse at because hmm, let's see if I can not interrupt myself already. A quick glimpse at how you and I have really different histories in terms of like the best I can say is like faith traditions. And this is not a talk about faith traditions, but the perspective of solstice that's really different for both of us because of that a little bit. Does that make sense?
yep, yep, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying.
So you go first.
Okay, so I guess if you're to talk about faith traditions, I mean, I don't know. I'm an agnostic through and through. It doesn't mean I'm not fascinated. I'm fascinated by religions, and I don't disregard anybody's belief system. I just don't know. And part of the
Mm-hmm.
problem with me has always been that there are too many things that are cool about so many different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that, since I don't really come from any sort of organized, point of view, um, sort of which sort of matches my artwork. I guess my faith is sort of reflects on the type of art I do. But the idea that I always try and find commonality between disparate things. I'm always trying to find things that come from that seem like they're so far apart, but are actually quite similar. And so I think that's one of the things that in terms of like when I look at something like solstice, what I see is something that has influenced so many friggin' belief systems on the planet, and even non-belief systems. I mean, if you want to, there are things on a scientific level that solstice is an important thing, right? So, I mean, there are so many different things that, depending on whatever perspective you're coming from, that this has as an important, momentous event. I mean, it's ancient. I mean, it's ancient. I mean, some of the structures that were built, like if you like in Ireland, the was it new? I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's like it's the hold on, I have it on my
Newgrange. It's
Newgrange is the word I'm
Newgrange in
looking.
Ireland.
That's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for. Yes,
Yeah.
Newgrange. I mean that's 5,000 years old, right?
Yeah.
And
Older than Stonehenge, by the way.
older than Stonehenge, exactly. And so that's the type of thing that you okay, so people are seeing this as a momentous day, the way they have that structure built. And for those who don't know what that is, it's totally like an Indiana Jones sort of thing, because on this day, at a particular time of day, there's this tomb, and it's a tomb to they were sort of like gods and that are sort of mythical gods that lived in this place, in this tomb essentially. And there's the head god who lives there, and then there's also the river goddess who lives there. And on this particular day, the sun just goes beaming through the hallway and just lights up the joint. And it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm not, what I don't know is I don't know what happens on summer solstice. If it's anything's different, I would think it would be quite different. But I think the winter solstice is really the key day because it just illuminates the whole joint. But
I
anyway,
think even looking at my notes, even though we didn't collaborate,
oh, you have
even looking at my notes, I have some notes about that.
do you? I bet.
Okay.
Do you have the proper pronunciation of the various deities?
Probably not. Definitely
Well,
not. I didn't even write them down.
no,
No.
I mean, yeah, some of those Celtic gods and event names are a mouthful. Like, for instance, it's who is it? It's the Celtic one. Let's see, I have it in my notes here. It's the pagan Celtic. Oh, yeah, it's Mian Gevri, which is spelled totally different than what you would expect that to be. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's the big
Yeah.
Celtic festival. So
Yeah. I'm going to say that you said it right. I'll just
yeah,
believe
you
you.
can buy it. You can buy it. There might be some Celts out there who would disagree, but
Yeah.
all
Awesome.
right. So tell me
Okay.
tell me about your perspective on all this.
Okay, so there is a chat, there is a note in the chat that asks if I can give a bio on you, and so I'm going to say something really quickly
Yeah,
because I can tell that's Janice that follows me, and so it occurred to me, hi Janice, there are people that may know who I am and don't know you, and
that's a
vice
good point.
versa.
That's a good point.
So I will say my perspective really quickly, and then we can do a quick little self bio. Um. So I was raised decidedly Christian, and I still adhere to a lot of Christian beliefs, much less denominational specific than I used to be. And the way that I see, solstice and some of those holidays that were considered like pagan holidays, it was always kind of like a very taboo thing in terms of discussing them in that way. Uh, kind of in my community, my group of people. But the older I get and the more I recognize how so much more fun it is to be curious in life, just in general as a practice, the more I like to look at things that have existed for a long, 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 long time as probably having some purposefulness and some meaning, even if they don't seem to fit in some sort of specific faith tradition. So when I look at things like solstice, and there's bazillions of other things, like for those of you that don't know me, I'm an avid gardener. It's like it's the thing I love as much as art, if not more, and making it. And there's traditionally some really important timing of planting things that relate to the moon. And, for eons, it was just kind of this superstitious sort of probably a more spiritually based practice to plant this then and that then and what's the moon doing and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much like really boring, dry science and data now that shows, I mean, we know about the ocean tides, right? And how the moon influences those. But we're also learning about how the literal gravity of Earth changes when the moon changes. And when you plant something that needs to set really deep roots, for example, when you do it at a certain time in the cycle of the moon, you get a better result. And that's just like science, boring earth science that you maybe could have learned in high school, So
Right.
when I look at things like that from this perspective of like, what if I take off my lens of judgment and assumption and look at this with curiosity? It doesn't mean I'm going to suddenly like adapt every aspect of it, but I always see ways that this thing that I'm curious about applies to me, and really not only just kind of like fun ways, but I tend to deeply spiritualize and internalize things. Like I love metaphors, right? And I can make a metaphor out of darn near anything,
Never
like a really
metaphor you didn't
profound
like.
never. And if I can't find one, I make one. So I really love looking at things that have existed in humanity for as long as something like solstice celebrations, as like, I wonder, okay, especially for those of us living in a time where we're so ruled by electronic systems. And I love my iPhone. I love my computer. I love all of those things. I am all in for being a full participant in modern society. And also, I'm aware that that's not our natural way of like moving through the world and moving through the seasons, to be like the same electronically influenced being 365 days of the year. So I've come to find and really value and appreciate rhythms in earth. And this is the stuff I used to kind of scoff at. Just confession, I used to think it was so hippie woo woo for people to be like, oh, let's move with the rhythms of the earth. And I'm like, no, you just do it, you just make it happen. And I think there's room and truth for all of that. So for me, it's really fun to look at what have humans, maybe even if they didn't fully understand it, they honored it and incorporated it into their practices. What have they been doing for a long, long time that maybe we've sort of lost touch with? And from a Christian perspective, for example, like maybe there's like some divine purpose in that that's for our good, that if we just categorically write it off because maybe we don't understand the roots, or maybe we don't like the roots, or whatever, then we're missing some really great opportunities for kind of just like a more peaceful, harmonious, rhythmic existence on the planet. And this especially applies, I think, with creative cycles.
Well, I
Um,
mean, don't you? I mean, I tend to think that for me being the agnostic through and through, it's sort of, God is just another name for somebody else's God. That your God is it's all relatable. It's sort of what you call this, you called something else then. It's sort
right,
of
with different
things evolve,
understandings and
especially, and
names.
it evolves based on time and what each society needs and what's
Mm-hmm,
important to that culture. Societies
mm-hmm,
change, therefore, our belief systems are going to change to some degree. And
right.
you know, but I think though, I mean, I guess I should probably those people who don't know who I am. My name is
Yes,
Michael
do a little
deMeng.
bio.
Do a little bio. Yes, I am an assemblage artist. I've known Stephanie for many, many years, almost 20 years probably now. We used to teach at a lot of the same venues back in the day, but we're both professional artists. But yes, I lean. We're sort of like Donnie and Marie to some degree. Except I'm a little bit creepy.
You're Donnie, right?
I would be Donnie. Yeah, purple
Okay,
socks,
just
right?
check it.
But yeah, so I deal with a little more of the shadowy sides of things, I guess you might say, um,
Yeah,
than Stephanie. But
yeah.
yeah. So, but anyway, back to the topic at hand.
Hang on,
I
I'm sorry. Can I
Go ahead.
pause you because
Yeah, of
you
course.
said something that I think is really important
Okay.
to me.
Okay.
There are a lot of people, a lot of artists who explore the shadowy sides of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And and we all have our own sort of like barometer as to how much we want to like plug into that realm that person is creating. And the thing that I appreciate the most about you, and I've said this before, and this isn't just flattery, this is real. Let me just say, I don't have a lot of like really dear decades long friends. Um, and that's probably my fault because I have such like high standards, I guess. I don't even know if that's the word. But like I don't want to be bothered with nurturing friendships that don't have like real substance to them. And I try to bring substance to a friendship too. But Michael explores these dark themes, but his presence in the world, like as a human, he's really fun. He's fun and he's light and he's encouraging,
Don't believe it. I'm not
and it's
fun.
1,000% true. And so I think like Michael in a lot of ways is, and maybe if I'm honest too, without, I don't mean to be braggy, but like maybe me, but in the reverse side, like I can tend to go really into these dark places, but I want to be this like happy go lucky person in the world. And so I think one of the things that I think is so admirable about Michael and his art and his way of being in the world is he seems to do a really good job of not being afraid to look into the really dark, mysterious, taboo-y kind of places and say, what can I learn about being a more fun, happy, contributive human in the world? So it's kind of this, it can seem kind of like this contradiction. Like some people look into the dark to like try to be more of that, whatever that is for you, and that's fine. But that's why I think it's so interesting about Michael's. He's like, explores these dark themes, but then he's like, there's a lot of laughter in that conversation because it's like, here's how this applies to being like a real human who has to grocery shop and who has to like navigate Christmas for people and like all of that stuff. So I just wanted to comment on that because that to me feels really relevant, and it kind of is the whole point of even exploring a concept like solstice is like, where do both the light and the dark exist in myself, and how does that show up in my creative practice? So
Well,
I'll
and
shut
yeah,
up
I mean,
now.
exactly. I mean, because I think that the topic is really about that balance, because that's when you're talking about solstice. Solstice is okay. So there is a neo-pagan. So when I say neo-pagan, neo-pagan means it's okay. Pagan being ancient, sort of the ancient
Right.
belief systems, the woods folks and all that other stuff, pre-Christian in many cases.
Very
And the
earth-based.
neo-pagan would be stuff that's more recently adopted. So there's a neo-pagan, I think, a great metaphor that describes um, the the solstices. Okay, so and it's the Holly King and the Oak King. So basically, the concept is that pretty much from summer solstice, the at the end of summer solstice, that's when the Holly King comes into power. So the Holly King comes grooving along, and of course, Holly, and this is based on this new sort of metaphor is based on more of a Celtic metaphor. It's just a little more, it's a tidier way to look at it. So the holly being like, things that are green in the wintertime, things that thrive in the wintertime. So
Hmm.
pretty much from the end of summer solstice, when the sun starts to decline, um, the Holly King is in charge of the planet. Now, as soon as today is the big battle. This is where the Holly King and the Oak King duke it out. And of course, we know how it all ends. We know that by the end of today, the Oak King will win, and the Oak King will then reign until the summer. And so I always thought that was a great metaphor because it's everlasting, it never changes, and they're necessary. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the thing. So when you're giving me all the nice kudos, to me, I could be dark, I could do that, but does that make me complete? I mean,
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
doesn't. So,
Exactly.
and granted, my art is shadowy, but I always try and have humor in it as well. So it's one of those things that I find that the metaphor of the solstice and the importance of this is the idea that you have these two halves. As individuals, you have two halves. As a planet, we have two halves, and obviously it's more complex than that.
Mm.
But on a simplistic level, that is an interesting way to see it as a metaphor, I think. And now the thing is, as we have to the thing that's cool about solstice, by the way, I should mention before we move on to a different topic, but um, the thing about solstice that's really cool is that, if you ever like, I used to do track, and I hated doing long distance races, right?
Oh my gosh, same.
Oh, I mean, I was a sprinter, right? Because you get it
Me
over with.
too.
Yeah,
Me
yeah, get it
too.
get it over with. You didn't those guys who ran the 440, it's like nuts. And then
My
beyond
brother
that.
ran cross country, and I'm like,
Oh,
are you just trying to
yeah.
escape life? Because
Yeah,
that's where that's
exactly.
heading.
Sucks. Anyway, but the thing was that the halfway point for a distance run is always like key. It's like, oh, I made it this far, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of the thing of what today is. It's like, okay, well, I made it halfway through the dark season. So now I know, that I can probably make it to the end. I mean, I'm not saying it's not going to be hard, but the halfway point is always kind of an important thing. And if you can do that, then, you're groovy, and it means you're closer to light than you were.
Hmm.
So, and that's which, by the way, I mean, today is also Shabi Yalda. If you were from Persia, ancient Persia, Iran, Turkey celebrates it also. But Shabi Yalda is basically, ancient wise, it's sort of the birth or rebirth of Mithra, the god of light. And
Hmm.
so it means light's coming. You got, good times ahead,
Yeah.
warm climates.
And I think within the Iranian version of that, if based on a little bit of research that I was really enjoying going down, that this is a day where they hole up with family.
Yeah.
They hole up with family because that's considered the best way to protect yourself from any darkness out in the world is to intentionally surround yourself with your people, with your family, and they eat and they feast and they have fun and but the
Yeah.
idea is we're here together and we're going to keep each other safe just by way of being together, which I thought was such a beautiful um a beautiful focus and intention. And so one of the things that you mentioned that I thought was really cool is I don't know what's wrong with us Westerners. I love being a Westerner, but sometimes I'm like, why did we decide this was the beginning of winter? This is historically was called midwinter.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is, in fact, some people will call it that instead of the beginning of winter, like midwinter slash solstice, or kind of like the same, the different word for the same thing. And I was doing just a couple little fun facts. There's Stonehenge we know about, and like Michael said, he talked about the tomb. My research was showing that there are even more what they call wood henges all over the
Right.
world
Right.
that are the same
They haven't lasted as
idea.
long though.
No, I wonder why, and there are some even older than Stonehenge in America. There's one that's only like 6 years old. It's brand new. It was part of a Renaissance fair thing that I think is pretty fun and cool that they built it. It's in, I want to say, Ohio, called Ohio Stonehenge. It's basically a giant wood. It looks like a wood like a horse arena, just a
Oh,
big
sure.
circular
Sure.
kind of a
Yeah.
thing. But the entrances are placed strategically. There's one in Machu Picchu. There's a lot that scientists don't know about Machu Picchu, but there are some buildings in Machu Picchu that are laid out with these like altars in the middle that suggest these were these were chambers specifically for winter solstice. These were
Okay,
chambers
when you say winter
specifically.
solstice, you mean their winter solstice though, right? Which would be our summer
Good
solstice.
question.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that would be,
I
yeah,
should say solstices because
solstices.
I
Yeah.
think they're
Yeah.
both are both.
Yeah.
But, they don't have like proof or records of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But considering that a lot of their worship was, a lot of their deity, some of their most dominant deity anyway was the sun god, whose name I can't remember what they called him. You
Oh,
probably
Incan?
know.
Yeah, I can't remember Incan.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know as much about Incan
Yeah, I don't
mythology.
know as much about any of it. I'm just like really fascinated to learn. But then there's the serpent mounds in Ohio that are
Hmm.
really fun to research. It's evidently it's not known for sure that is a solstice structure, but it's laid out like very specifically and exactly like a solstice structure would be. And then there's one in Illinois that dates back to 1000 AD in Illinois, called the Cahokia Woodhenge. And I think they're working. They've found the footprint of it. Of course, the wood hasn't excuse me, survived. But what I love about this, and I was listening to a lot of I'm really drawn to American Indigenous elder teaching. Like if you were to go to, some sort of ceremony with any sort of North American indigenous tribes, a lot of the times there are elders who will tell stories and teach. They're teaching people. And so I was listening to some really beautiful elders talking about the idea of solstice, or the day of solstice, with specifics to how they recognize it. And one of the themes that came up over and over and over. So first of all, these henge structures like Machu Picchu and some of those other ones, they're not just the entrances and exits are lined up for the sun path. Janice says she lived by Cahokia and that there's a lot of mounds. One is huge. That's awesome. Okay, that sounds like a fun summer field trip. Um, but a lot of these structures, the idea isn't so much that the light passes through the entrance and the exit a certain way. It's that when December 21st or solstice hits, the innermost tomb is the most illuminated it can be.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because we're talking about like the shortest day of the year, the least amount of sunshine, but they've got these structures built to where this inner tomb or this inner chamber, whatever the individual structure has, is going to get the most light of the entire year that it will ever get. So I'm assuming that in summer solstice it would get the most shadow or something. And so to me, the metaphor in that is really beautiful in that even in the darkest, whether we're in seasons of life, seasons of creativity, or whatever, there's still that potential that the most inner truth, the most inner sanctum of our being is like, that's when we can see it the best. That's when we're not so distracted by all this external light and flashing and color and prettiness. And we have to kind of look within because that's the only thing we can kind of see sometimes. And
Well, and I think though, I think that the other thing to consider that with all these structures, if you're talking about structures and the idea, especially astronomical and solstice timekeeping and all that stuff, the thing to consider is that you're a lot of times, see, we take for granted that oh, I know the sun's going to come out tomorrow. You know, you got your Annie song. I mean, we have so much science now that sort of
mhm,
understands kind of the way the world works, better so than they did 5,000 years ago. And one thing is, back 5,000 years ago, you might not be so sure that the winter's never going to end. And so, in a way, one of the things that those types of things do is say, look, this happened last year, and look what happened. We had spring that followed after. So people go there and so, oh, I guess we are going to get spring again. We aren't in eternal winter. We aren't in eternal gloom. And so when you have those markers, those markers, universal markers, annual markers, whatever you want to use as a determinant, those things are helpful because you say, "Oh, yay! Okay, I know what's going on. I know what's next. I know what's next. You proved it to me last year, and I know it's going to happen again." And it's you know it's I don't, it's
yeah,
just it creates a sense of hope, which is really what I think a lot of people think of the solstice being the longest night of the year as being, oh, it's the darkest night of the year. Well, it is, but it also leads to more light. So the concept of what you were discussing of yes, it's a point of hope because we know
yeah,
based on what we've learned that it is something that we can move forward. We can move beyond the shackles. And I mean, like we've all gone through like the shackles of just life, right? I
mm-hmm,
mean,
mm-hmm,
everybody goes through this depression. So in a way, it also is a metaphor for that thing of like life sucks. I hate everything. Blah, blah, blah. But wait a second. Wait a second. Maybe not, because there's hope that through the cycle that it doesn't have to stay. It never has to stay the same.
yeah.
Things are in perpetual motion.
And that is such a good point because I think it's really easy to have that awareness that yeah, the sun always comes up tomorrow, but it's also really easy to wonder if the sun is going to come up in us.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like we know the sun's going to come up around the planet, but like dang, I'm in a really dark place. I'm not sure if the sun's going to come back up in me. You know that like am I also inevitably aligned for the light to return, whatever that looks like. You know, creative flow, excitement, non-depression. You know, whatever that heaviness can be in us, and that's where one of the things that I love so much about like there's this one she a Lakota elder. I can't remember what tribe she was from, but she talked about how in indigenous North American cultures, there's the idea that son is grandfather son, and he leaves us, and Mother Earth gets cold, and she will stay cold until grandfather son comes back. But we're the ones the people on Mother Earth, she's too cold to ask him to come back herself. This is the story, right?
Right.
And so we have to light a fire.
Yeah.
We, the people on cold Mother Earth, we have to ask Grandfather Sun to come back. We have to dance around the fire and generate heat within our own bodies, and I really love that, because that to me is like the difference between, well, I hope I hope my depression eventually lifts, but I don't know. I hope my creative flow comes back, but I don't know. It's like that's the, not to like assume that everything is all about our personal action, but in a sense, this is the way we're invited to participate in solstice energy, is like, okay, we know the sun's going to come back. Like this literal sun is going to be coming back more and more and more and more. But where in our own lives are we being asked to take some responsibility for the warmth and the light coming back too? What fires do we need to light for ourselves?
Well, and that has many different things too, because it's sort of like the idea of the ant and the grasshopper,
Grass, yeah,
right? So the
yeah.
idea of like you as a group, as a society, or family, community, however you want to pose it, you as a community plan for those dark months. And then you get together on solstice because you need to, well, first off, you need to be reminded, like we're talking about, you need to, it's going to be harder to stay positive.
Hmm.
So, I mean, way harder to, I mean, suicide rates are, much higher in wintertime. And so it's harder to stay positive in these dark times. And so by that metaphoric light, by the light of our friends and family, yeah, I mean, it's a way of getting through, not just metaphorically, but personally, and also in terms of just, okay, we are going together, and you've talked about this earlier, is just going together, we have to get through to the next hurdle. We have to make it
Yeah.
now to the finish line when, the things start to sprout, right? So
Yeah.
the sun
Well, and
starts to come up.
it brings up that like growing up, one of the phrases that was thrown around in my home a lot, and I, to the point where it really frustrated me at times because I just wanted people to commiserate, is, people would be like, my aunt, for example, I lived with an aunt and uncle all through high school, and she just was like a literal angel on earth, the kindest, most loving person ever. And if I went to her with this, like, you know, what felt like the world ending at 15 years old problem, she'd be like, give me this big old hug, and she goes, this too shall pass. She would just say, this too shall pass. And if of course it's rooted in biblical scripture and all that kind of thing. So, but at the same time, she showed me through example and also just through a lot of words that kind of like, this too shall pass, but what are you going to do in the meantime? Like how can you take care of yourself in the meantime?
Right.
And that's
Right.
that's kind of like, okay, this long dark season will pass, but I'm going to light a fire in the meantime.
Yeah.
And that to me is such a, I mean, I have experienced that theme in my art practice over and over and over, to the point where I've spent some seasons of life just really frustrated when I would hear people say that, if you're doing it right, if you're doing art right, you're just excited every day, or if you're
That's
if
yeah.
you're a real artist, you have to paint every day. And I'm like, I'm a real human. I know that for sure. And I don't feel excited every day about something. But I also didn't want to assume that because I wasn't excited every day about creating, that meant I wasn't a real artist. For me, it was more like, what does it look like to be a real human who feels something different potentially every day, or goes through really challenging seasons of life, and how that affects my creativity and my art practice? Like, oh, okay, that means that this season I'm not super excited about, maybe I'm not just like that feeling of like, oh, I can't wait to get back to that canvas.
Yeah. See,
But
I
maybe
don't know.
it's like,
Yeah.
what, you don't know
I'm not
what?
that. No, I'm not into, I mean, I don't know that I've ever had a day where I'm like, hey, I'm going to the studio, but it's
Yeah.
always, it's
Well,
work, but
yeah, I've had lots of moments where I'm excited to go work on the thing that I feel like I was finally getting traction on.
yeah,
An
exactly.
idea
Yeah.
came to me in the night or something. But the analogy that has really helped me is like, I think about, the earth goes through 4 seasons in a whole year. right? I feel like sometimes I go through all those four seasons in my own self in like a day,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah, I was going to
that's
talk to you about
really,
that. I was going to mention that about you and
but you
have a
want to talk
conversation.
about
Yeah.
perimenopause? Is that
Yeah.
what? I know you're an
I was going to bring
expert.
that up. I didn't know this would be a good setting to do it though. I was going to do it on a more personal level, but whatever. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No. So, so there really is a lot of freedom, I guess is the best word that it feels like for me to recognize I don't always have to be like if what's the opposite of winter solstice for me when I think of it like in the garden for example, it's when everything is flushed out, it's full, it's producing, it's beautiful, it's like what's the opposite of that? That feels like the ultimate like creative flow, right? But the opposite of that would be like everything looks dead. I was out planting garlic in the mud, like this does not feel like, and Vince and I will talk on the land, like we'll be walking around the land and we will often be like, we're ankle deep in mud, but remember when we couldn't keep this watered enough during the summer? Like we kind of reflect on its opposite because it gives us some perspective in that moment to not feel like, oh no, this land is never going to dry out again. We're going to forever be in a swamp,
Right.
and to just like, yeah, this too shall pass. But in the meantime, this is when I'm going to take care of these other tasks.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Now we sort of advertise this as solstice and art. So, okay, so from an artist perspective,
Hmm.
um, so just from an art form, because I was thinking about this, is how this relates to art. Because, for instance, in my case, I think that I get more done in the wintertime than I do in
Hmm.
the summertime, by
Hmm.
far. So artistically, in terms of creativity, it's sort of like, it's kind of like it's sort of it's switched in terms
Hmm.
of, in terms of what's supposed to happen. So I always found it sort of fascinating, when you have like this, the heavier times are actually, for me, the more creative times is where growth happens more so than on the opposite time of the year.
Hmm.
And so as you know, like, and that's probably especially true with you, given how much gardening you do in the summertime. I would imagine you're in the studio tons more, this time of year, especially probably moving out of the holiday season.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, is that not true?
It is absolutely true. And another factor that really contributes to that is uh, uh let's see, it's 2024. So 3 years ago, my husband and I downsized from not a big house, like 1,400 square feet or something, to about 375 square feet. So my husband and I were empty nesters, except our little 6-pound Chihuahua, who we forget exists because he just sleeps all the time. And so it's a one room. Our home is one room except for the bathroom and the closet. And so uh the studio has become my respite in the winter when I mean he's my favorite person to hang out with, just to I don't ever get tired of hanging out with my husband, but sometimes I don't want to hear what he's listening to. you know, I don't want to hear one more chainsaw video on YouTube, or I don't want to hear one more spaghetti western, like and that's fine. I can put AirPods in or whatever, but sometimes just leaving that tiny space. So I
Yeah.
definitely spend more time here in the winter. But that has been an evolving thing too, because it wasn't always this way. It's kind of a like I'm 3 years into a whole new kind of way of existing in the world, and
Right.
it might last another 6 months, it might last another decade. We have no idea how our season of life is going to change, and so I definitely absolutely spend more time. The challenge for me is I feel more inspired and lit up and full of ideas during the times where I'm outside a lot more. So it takes a little bit more mental work, though I'm in the studio more. It takes a little bit more mental work to get into what people would call creative flow. And that's just like I've just learned to make peace with that. And I'll do all the things. I'll put on the music. I'll, bring a cup of chai down. I'll do all the little ritual things to kind of set myself up to be excited about it. But I know that none of those things are required. I don't need music to create. I don't need all, but it's a lot more fun. you
Well, does
know,
your,
to
I mean, because I know, like, for me, I don't know that, I don't know, like, that my art changes, for instance, like, in the winter
yeah,
time than the summertime.
yeah,
I think in my
same.
case, it's pretty consistent, but that's just, that's because but that I think can be different with different artists, though. I think that there are some artists who what's going on outside might directly, well, if they're more an artist who gets their energy, their creative juices from what they see directly,
Yeah, it's gonna
I could see
change.
how this, the change would be a dramatic, oh, okay, I am, okay, I look at that sunrise in the middle of winter. Okay, so I'm going to process that and create something from that. Yeah, I'm too much in my head,
Yeah.
to pay attention to what's going on out there. So because I'm working at all the stuff in here. So for me it doesn't affect what my output is.
Hmm.
But as I said, I think there are plenty of people. I know people who do, who do plein air sort of style artwork. Well, yeah, I mean, you're not, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm out in the snow painting a lily field. Okay, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not going to happen. So, I mean, do
Yeah.
you think it changes your artwork at all?
You
Or is
know,
it,
it probably doesn't change in ways that people would at a glance see a lot of difference. If I held like summer work up next to winter work, uh, just in terms of like the basics of color and composition and style, that's probably pretty consistent. But the where my mind goes, the depths of where my mind goes definitely shifts. I can go into much deeper, I don't want to say underworld, but like inner world
well,
question
you
asking.
have more time. I
Yeah.
mean, you have more time you don't have to worry about, planting tomatoes.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well,
in your case, because I
also,
mean, because I see all your shit on on Instagram, and
what
you are
did you
just
call
like,
it?
oh, today we're doing this thing. Oh my gosh, and then tomorrow
Yeah.
we're doing this thing, and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, here's the thing that's different about that for me is I get immediate feedback. This is the and I don't want to be labor gardening. I fully understand it is not many people's thing.
Yeah,
But somewhere in your life, you probably have something that gives you immediate
yeah,
feedback
yeah.
that is a really, really useful tool. So, for example, when I'm out driving my tractor, it's actually my brother's tractor, but possession is 9 cents of ownership, right? So I have my brother's tractor, and my mind starts thinking about some of the same things I'm thinking about when I'm in my studio. I start wondering about like, like the dynamics of friendship. Like I'm always thinking about these relational themes in life. I just that's just the way it is. Like uh for example, I'm really my husband and I are in a season of our marriage after we just celebrated 25 years together where it's like we're new people in our marriage in a lot of ways for each other, and we're having so much more fun. We've always had fun, but we're having so much more fun than we've ever had. But it's because there have been times that were really hard where then I've been, for example, out on my tractor and really just kind of chewing on like, how do I want to show up for him and myself in this situation, this season that we're going through? And so those are the kinds of things that I'm always kind of mulling on in life, right? So I'm on my tractor and I'm kind of mulling over this thing. I just can't help it. And then I'm scooping up manure from the neighbor and dumping it on my garden. And in my mind, I'm getting this immediate feedback of like, oh, look, this came out of a horse's butt and now it's going to feed my garden. So my mind immediately starts going, this shit that my husband and I are going through, this is going to grow an amazing garden. Like that's I just so immediately start making those connections in the winter, or let me just say when I'm not in the garden, because I actually do still do some winter gardening. It's just muddy and cold, but um it's more like preparatory type stuff or kind of closing things out. But in the studio, I don't have quite that same immediate feedback in response to what I'm doing. And it's weird because there are people who can experience that immediate feedback with certain colors. Like, oh, I'm really feeling drawn to this like hot pink, and that tells them some sort of like um spiritual answer. And I'm just like, I don't like hot pink. I'm not going to use it, right? So I have different sort of it takes me longer and more like commitment to the question, to like sitting with the question while I'm creating, for me to start seeing some of that answer feedback. Does that even make, I don't know if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
no, I understand. I understand what you're saying. I understand. I mean, because I think that well, you're a very introspective creature. So it's you have
Poor
a
Vince.
what
Sorry.
yeah, I mean a lot. I mean, and I think most people are to some degree, but I think that you kind of wear it on your sleeve, and I think
Hmm.
that it's um I find I just from what you said, I find it kind of interesting how you know because for me gardening is drudgery. So, for me, I have a
Hmm.
very different perspective on gardening than you do. I
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and because it's just not my
And I
bag.
totally get it, because there are times I feel that way about it and I
Yeah.
love it.
Well,
So
and I
sorry, go
think
ahead.
that, but I think I appreciate the romance that you essentially
Yeah,
have with it, which is not a perfect romance. And
yeah,
but you recognize that, okay, I need to do this. And, I mean, I suppose we should, bring it into the topic a little bit, but it's sort of like the idea that it's that, you're doing while you're doing this work, you're doing other types of work. You're doing internal
yeah,
work while you're
yeah,
doing this stuff that's necessary for existence on a pragmatic level. You're doing some other stuff on a different type of pragmatic level, on a mental level, on a way
yeah,
of self-nurturing, I think. And I
yeah.
think that's, and I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, out of curiosity, I mean, I have a friend who she and her family, this artist family in Montana.
Wait a second, you have other friends?
You are not my only
I'm not
friend,
the
Steph.
only one?
No, not
Oh,
anymore. I've
oh,
yes. I've
oh,
made
go
new
ahead,
friends
sorry.
since last we talked. But what these friends of mine do is they every year on Ted's ranch, he has a cattle ranch in Billings, Montana area, and they're all artists though, um, like his daughter and all this stuff. They all come out there. A whole bunch of artists come out there on winter solstice, and
Ah,
they have a big bonfire, right? Now,
mm,
what they're burning is artwork they all hate, their own artwork that they hate. Um, and I thought that was interesting because, there are some people who might be saying, "Oh, you never should ever do that," da 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 da. I wouldn't do that only from the standpoint. I'm not saying there isn't work of mine that shouldn't be thrown in a bonfire, but I'm by the very nature of the type of stuff I create, I'm cannibalistic. So if something's not working, I will dissect it and put it into something else to make it work. So from that standpoint, but these are predominantly all painters, and so big canvases. And so, I mean, granted, pragmatically, oh, we'll just paint white gesso over it and call it good. But I
assuming
think
there's
they're
no texture to their paint
right.
underneath
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right, right. But I think the thing is, though, is there's something pretty amazing about that concept because the idea of um, first off, there as an artist, I know that there is crap that I've made, and I know there's stuff in my studio right now that I know it really doesn't. It really shouldn't be seen by anybody but me because it's just not worthy of it. The
Mm.
the problem always is when you say that about something of yours and then it's like the first thing to sell in a show and you're like, what the, but
Yeah.
I'll take the money, but what are you
Yeah.
thinking, right?
But I'm not
Uh,
happy about it.
right, exactly, exactly. But I think I think there's something kind of cool about that in relation to the solstice in that it's sort of like I'm getting rid of the cobwebs, the things that were binding me up, the things that were heavy on me. I'm getting rid of that so that I can move forth. I mean, there's an event. I don't know if you saw it in your research, but in Brighton, the burning of
Mm,
the clock.
mm.
Where
Very
they
briefly. Yeah.
yeah, it's really sort of a newer festival. I think it started in the 90s, but the idea is that it's all these lanterns with little clock faces on it, and they have a big bonfire at the end, where they burn the clock. And the idea is that it's sort of to decommercialize the whole Christmas holiday season and
Hmm.
essentially give an opportunity. So when you burn these things, the idea is that you are burning the weight of
Hmm.
the past year, all the things that were burdensome to you, things were weighing down, and open up pathways to a more hopeful future. So
Yeah.
burning to open up, to bring more light in,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, what's interesting about the story you just shared with the art that you don't like is, and this doesn't need to be a long tangent, but there's there's something worth questioning. At least I've experienced this for myself, so I won't tell you you need to do it. When I have hated a piece of art and it's the first thing that sells, I have to then ask myself, wait a second, why was it even for sale? Why did he even put it out there? Why did I even bring it to the show? And that's not any sort of condemnation question. It's more just like, wait a minute, maybe there's something in me that recognized some value in that, even if I didn't like the way it turned out. Because if I really like on all internal and external conscious and subconscious levels thought it was unworthy of being seen, it would never have been seen to be able to be purchased. And so it's kind of like a good, I mean, it's happened to me so many times where my least favorite piece is the one that everyone's like flocking over, and it's usually the one I didn't price the best because I
Right,
didn't
right,
think it was
exactly.
like,
Yeah,
dang it, I could have
yeah,
charged
yeah.
3 times that. But it's so for me, it's more a question of how willing am I to stay conscious of the unconscious things that are going on inside, the unconscious assumptions that I have about what's possible for me, the unconscious assumptions I have about, how for me there's so much of a question of like, do I even know what I'm doing? I mean, that
Mhm.
is like, and and I spent a lot of time trying to like, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm a good artist. And that didn't feel any better.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what has been really, really, and this feels very solstice energy to me, what feels really, really useful to me now is when I say something like, do I even know what I'm doing as far as art goes? It's like, maybe not. I don't know, but I'm gonna do this thing that sounds fun to try next,
Well,
you
and
know?
I think that now I wouldn't like in that ritual of burning artwork. What I could see, like, okay, so in theory, I don't know that a lot has been definitive, but it's said that in like Roman and Rome, some of the Roman Saturnalia festivals, there used to be like a sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
a sacrifice with gladiators. Okay, that would and so that would appease Saturn. Okay, the harvest
Mm-hmm.
god, which was
Mm-hmm.
Saturn. That was their solstice thing. Then it moved to something that was more symbolic. So they had a little disc that had a head on it because they probably just didn't want to kill as many people. Well, the thing is I could see, as opposed to decapitating, use my art as a metaphor for, like something physical, as opposed to totally decapitating something, why not? I could see giving a representation of something of
Yeah.
my art,
Yeah.
right? So it would be like I will give a tribute, maybe something, I'm not going to burn up all the art I don't like, for the reason that you've stated, but I could see like making a tribute and saying, I mean, you do your sacrifice, maybe you create something specifically, for that,
For that. Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
that this is made specifically to burn, whether it's a thanks, whether it's a a way of, okay, you represent all the things I hated and everything I did and all the pieces in the past, and I offer you up to the fire, in
Yeah.
hopes that I do better this year. I could see doing
Yeah.
that. I would be really hard pressed for, a few reasons to actually, burn,
Yeah,
like,
same.
you
I'll
know
re I'll repurpose before I'll burn or
yeah,
destroy. But
yeah,
I have thrown a few pieces on the fire, but usually it's because I've repurposed it and repurposed it and repurposed it,
yeah,
and it's just not coming together.
yeah,
And so I'm like, okay, I'm done pouring energy into it. It's not out of this like rageful rawr, release. It's more just like, all right, I gave it a good shot and it's not working, and the thing has too much texture or whatever. One thing that I think is really important to consider with concepts like burning your art or any sort of thing like that is we're changing beings.
yeah,
we are
yeah,
we are people who change, and there are seasons of my life where the thing I need to learn to do, the thing I need to embrace in myself is the like I'm imagining in those movies where the heroine, she's like leather clad and she's real badass and she like pours all this gasoline and then she lights a match and walks away in slow motion
Right,
and
right.
you know, there are times in my life where I need to be that energy. I need to embrace that energy and burn some stuff down in my life that I kept trying to kind of like make work. And then there are
Yeah.
seasons of life, whether it's and this will lead me to one thing I just want to say before I give it back to you is there are seasons in life too where instead of burning it down, we have to go, okay, wait a second. How can I approach this differently? And we actually revisit the thing. We, you know, so it's not that we're always supposed to burn, you know, our art at solstice, although that sounds really fun, and I wish they were my friends in Montana too. But the idea is being awake to what is it that I need in this season in my life. And for me, regardless of what season it is, the thing I love so much about solstice, and it also applies with like if you have any sort of proclivities towards the energy, the supposed energies of full and new moons and those kinds of things. I'm not really one for like co-opting my agency to things like that, but it is kind of fun to tune into collective perspectives and like, how can I learn from this? But there's the idea with uh solstice is incorporating words that start with re. Like this is a really beautiful time, and I'm thinking along the lines of like creativity, art, making art, feeling in creative flow. Is like this is a really great time to explore themes around like rebirth, repair, reset, recommit, remember, revisit, like anything that's kind of like reevaluating, and then going forward like deciding, okay, I'm going to light the fire with this sort of, I've revisited this thing. I've reevaluated some way of being that I want to kind of shift or I want to burn. You know, the idea of burning the art is like, I've reevaluated this piece of art and I've decided it's not worth existing anymore. So I'm going to burn it and then I'm going to go create the new art.
Well, I mean, it's, it's that whole the old idiom of, to create you must first destroy. That it's that idea, and that's certainly true in the nature of what I do. I have to destroy something to create it from found
Mm-hmm.
objects. You dissect
Mm-hmm.
something to create it, and that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but it does on a certain level, because you have to break down something old to create something new. And I think that when you have
Or
something
even
that,
incomplete. You have to bring
yeah,
incomplete things together.
yeah, yeah. Because I think that because I think the bonfire, I think there is the idea of a bonfire is okay. There's a few things that are cool about it. First off, in the middle of winter, it's really warm. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
nurturing. It's also destructive,
Mm-hmm.
which it's in a way, it's kind of, I mean, I love watching things burn up in the fire. I love seeing, you throw a log and you're mesmerized by it. So I think that the idea of watching transformation before your eyes is a pretty mesmerizing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it also opens up your imagination to like possibility of like you understand the idea of transience, the way things alter and change, and nothing is permanent. And I think that it really does. There's something just primal about it. That whole
Yeah.
thing of watching something literally transform, not in slow motion, but literally transform into something entirely different, as
with
right before your
with
eyes,
intensity.
with intensity.
Like, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And you know, the metaphors, of course, are my favorite thing and things like this. And you have that intense immediate heat and visual experience of paint bubbling and the
Yeah.
frame of the canvas warping and you know, whatever happens when you burn a piece. But then 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours later, there's probably still a lot of heat from the coals, you know, and then you go another week, another month, another 6 months, and there's a whole bunch of really great alkaline that, from a gardening perspective, nourishes soil in ways that other things can't. We have an abundance around here of what's called woolly mullein, super, super incredible
Willie
medicinal
Mullen.
woolly mullein, Batman. You know, we have lots of mullins, but that's one. It's really, really, really medicinal. It's the thing that helps me the most when I start getting lung congestion as I drink Mullein tea. And it's almost impossible to cultivate yourself. It will only grow where there has either been a fire or the previously disturbed soil. So, I think when people are afraid to do something as like aggressive as burning a piece of art, it's because they're only looking as far as the art being burnt. They're not
Yeah.
looking ahead and going, what can come from this? And I mean, we all know this idea of like rising from the ashes, but there's even more to it than something rising from the ashes. There's something completely new because of the ashes, not in spite of them, but because of them,
So
you know.
I live in a place that the city I live in outside of Vancouver is Coquitlam. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what that translates to in the First Nations, the Coquitlam people in this area, is land of stinky fishes. Because this
I
we are
can see why
by
you're drawn to it.
right, exactly, because this is where all the salmon come up stream to mate and die. And so there's a time of year at the end of fall when it smells so bad because all these salmon are dead on the all the little streams all over.
Wish I had that for my garden.
Well, exactly my point. Because of course that all, all their remains goes back into the, feeds all the things in the ponds and feeds all the things in the, it does so much that that decay is so
Mm-hmm.
important for the whole thing. I mean, you need,
Specifically fish decay,
fish decay. Yeah.
yeah, very, very unique.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of checking out the chat. I love a couple other RE words were thrown in, like reflect and reimagine. Um, I think if I were to encourage anybody, whether they do a bonfire, whether they do, something else for solstice, which by the way, someone just wrote reincarnate, that the practice of like kind of assessing for yourself what could really benefit from me sort of reevaluating or looking at in a new way. And that's the whole idea of is like kind of going back
Well,
and looking at it in a new way.
I think that, like, for instance, one of the things ritualistically, I don't know that we do anything um typically on solstice. My parents' anniversary is today, but
Oh,
like,
happy anniversary, Mon Pod deMeng.
that's right. And so, but we've never really done anything, ritualistically. But I started thinking, especially after I learned about the burning of the clocks, for instance. I could see us, going out and, putting, hopes and fears, or hopes and I guess you could call them curses of the past, and throw them on the grill and
Mm-hmm.
light them up. In a way, it's sort of like New Year's, and all that stuff's
Yeah.
so related anyway. And, though what we
Yeah.
do on New Year's was what used to be done on solstice, and what we do
Right.
with a Christmas tree was what used to be done, with Yule, and all these things are so interrelated. But the idea of, like, okay, take the longest night, yeah, why not just on a slip of paper, just write something, throw it on the something simple like that. Um, if for no other reason of recognizing what's bothering you, because sometimes you don't want to admit it, and also recognizing what you're hoping for, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's difficult, and you just say, okay, I'm putting it out to the universe. And I'm not, me being Mr. Agnostic, I'm not saying that's going to magically happen. I don't necessarily expect it to magically happen, but what I do believe does happen, and it helps me internally, help make that stuff get addressed, whether it's dealing with the past crap, or bringing forth good things from the future.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree, and I love it. And the analogy that's coming up for me is I have a 4-year-old grandson who is skin and bones. I mean, he's not, he's just really skinny. And he's constantly saying that he's starving to death. Not really, but he's a snacker. He loves food.
Right.
And he will come to me and his mom and whoever, whatever adults taking care of him for that day. And he'll say, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. And I'll start offering, well, do you want this? Do you want that? No, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. And I'll have to say to him, his name is Cove, and he's the sweetest little boy. I'll have to say to him, Cove, you need to tell me what you want to eat so that I can make it for you.
Yeah.
And then he'll be like, oh, okay, I want a peanut butter and jelly. And then voila, 3 minutes later, he's got what he wants, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, that's looking from I don't even want to say Christian, but from a whatever, not agnostic, but believing in ancestors and
Right,
spirits and
right,
all of that stuff, for me, that doing something like burning a piece of paper is kind of like saying, okay, here's what I want. Here's what I want to be done with.
yep,
And here's what I want going forward. And then all of these, for me, it's like I'm imagining there's like swarms of interested beings saying, okay, cool, now we know how to support her.
right, right. Because
You know,
you
and
can't get something unless you ask for it. I mean, you have to,
right,
you have to say this is what I want for it to happen,
right,
right?
right.
And
And
either
not
you're
only do
too
you have
afraid
all,
to ask, or you're too afraid to ask, or you haven't even formulated what it is you want yet.
yeah. And I think a lot of people either are too afraid to ask or haven't formulated it because they've identified so much as being troubled that they're like, well, wait a minute, or not troubled, but burdened or
Yeah.
frustrated or whatever. It's like, oh, if I'm going to ask for this thing, that means I'm also going to have to step up and take responsibility for myself in some ways that I haven't had to when I'm just, a little victim of life's horrible circumstances,
Yeah.
which we
Yeah.
all have those things. So it's the burning thing. The thing I love about it most is it's like kind of taking responsibility for it to the extent that you can. There's
Yeah.
so much, like you said, unknown that we don't know how this is going to work itself out. But it's like, okay, we're doing what we can. We're taking responsibility for saying, like, okay, I'm going to let this thing go. I'm going to let this thing go that I've been carrying around too long. And here's what I want to try to create going forward. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know if it's even possible. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to put it in words.
Right, because
And
and you have to be careful because if you write what you want from Santa down on a piece of paper, you better
mhm,
make sure it's what you want, to give because he's going to read it and he's going to give it to you, right? So you need
yeah,
to make sure you put the right thing down. Or you say, "Oh, I should have gotten the BB gun instead." So I
yeah,
mean, you get one piece of paper.
yeah.
Maybe you get
Get
one
one
piece of paper
letter.
for all the stuff you want to get rid of, and one piece of paper for the thing you want. Maybe you
Yeah,
limit it that way. I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if that's beneficial or if you have a stack, but
yeah,
regardless, I would think it might be beneficial to just on a personal psychological basis. Okay, what is it I really want? I'm going to pick the thing that I want the most and the thing that I want to get rid of the most, and you put those
yeah,
things. But
yeah.
I don't know.
And
Everybody's got to
there's a
work their own
huge,
bonfire differently, I suppose. But
I think that's perfect. And there's this huge willingness to surrender, because there's a lot of temptation, I think, to be like, ooh, I got to put the right thing down. I got to make sure I get the right thing. I write the right thing down or let go of the right thing because otherwise it'll all be wasted. And it's like, no, just the fact that you're like showing up to some sort of intentional opportunity like that, of whether it's a practice or a ritual or whatever. I
well,
think
hopefully it's
that's
not like a genie that's trying to, he's like, oh, died. Shouldn't have never asked for
dang
that
it.
because, genies are
Yeah,
tricksters that way.
yeah. They're notorious for like messing with us. Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
Okay. Okay. I don't see any questions. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I don't know what you would dare ask us at this point because we could riff on forever about it, but
Yeah, is there anything you wanted to, I mean, yeah, we should probably wind it up pretty soon, but I'm just
yeah.
looking through some of my notes that things, I mean, there's just tons of different festivals. I mean, in
Mm-hmm.
China and East Asia, the Dongji festival, which, everybody's eating, it's a family, more in many ways, Dongji it seemed me more like Day of the Dead in Summer Garden, that it was an
Mm,
ancestral type thing.
mm-hmm.
Soyol, which is Hopi and Zuni, which is
Mm,
making sacred art, art objects, things like that. Um, what else was on there? Uh, Toji, hot baths is so Japanese. We got the
ooh.
renewal, we got the renewal going through hot
Mm-hmm.
baths and then eating good stuff. And let's see, I know in Vancouver, problem is in Vancouver, we always have rain to contend with. So
Oh yeah, same.
I don't know if the Lantern Festival, we have a Lantern Festival today. So I don't know it's, depending on how rainy it's going to be. I don't know if that's gonna take place,
Yeah.
but
They should move it to
same
summer
idea as burning of the
solstice.
clock type thing. But
Yeah.
what's that?
I said they should move it to summer solstice. Then you only got
Right,
to worry about
exactly.
wildfires.
Exactly. They'll swap them.
Yeah. We've there have been a few years where on New Year's I send up those lanterns from our pasture, and it's really fun, and it's the only time of year I dare do something like that without worrying about starting a fire
Yeah, I
in
know. I mean,
wildfire country, you know.
Well, and yeah, I mean, exactly. It's like it should be that, well, especially, fireworks, right? They should
Yeah.
move all the fireworks. Most of the fireworks we get in Vancouver now are in the winter. So, but
Yeah. That's probably smart.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
All right.
I
Anything
guess
else?
I guess the only thought that I would offer to people specifically with regards to, we're like New Year, whatever energy that has for you, it's really changed for me. Like you said, this solstice time feels more in a lot of ways historically and culturally is more what we now do around New Year's. Um, looking, I tend to be prone as I age. I think probably perimenopause is a big part of it. Michael's an expert in the theme of evidently. I think he's going to give me some therapy later about it. No, but I have a propensity more and more to feel creatively weighed down, to feel I don't want to, I'm not going to call it seasonal affective disorder because that's like a specific clinical thing, but just the weight of being a human feels a little bit heavier to me in the winter. And so there's the resistance to be hopeful is also there more. Like it's like, oh, why bother? And I'm not an Eeyore person. And like if you were to meet me in person, and it's not that I'm fake happy. I really am I like hanging out with people, I like conversing, but my inner world gets heavier in the winter. And so the work required for me to not necessarily be happy go lucky in the winter, but to choose, like you said, to choose to like let go of stuff and decide what I want going forward and let it take time and let it be a slow growing of things evolving and knowing this too shall pass, and here's how I'm going to show up for myself in the meantime. I think is a really helpful thing because our heads can run away with us if you're anything like me, and I don't know if it's a woman thing more than a man thing. Vince says it happens to him, and so I think it's a human thing. But like it, the whatever our thought is, we can get momentum around that, and it can just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we have the opportunity, like what Michael's suggesting in sharing the stories of like burning the art. We have the opportunity to sort of like cut that off at the pass, that momentum, and say, okay, wait, we're gonna turn things around and start facing the other way. This
Stephanie, somehow you got muted. Hold on a second.
You muted everybody.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. But I just want to encourage you guys, if especially with regards to your art and your creative practice, if it feels like a heavier time of year, there's there's something really valuable to me. Having grace for myself, having, quote unquote good self-care doesn't mean allowing that to take over and swallow me up. It means like, how do I want to show up and take care of myself in this time? And that
Well,
means
and
kind of
I
like,
think that just as an artistic, one of the things that I hear a lot in just students of mine in art classes, always all the time about, well, why is it that this isn't working? Well,
mm-hmm,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, okay, you do all the things that you're supposed to do and it still doesn't work. Well, you know, things don't always go the way you expect them to go. And so I think that that's true in life as well,
mm-hmm,
right? So you just have to work through that. And it's sort of like if on an artistic level, I know that if something sucks tomorrow, or, sucks that I'm what I'm working on today, that I can turn it around. It's in my capability to do
mm-hmm,
that. It just doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next day, but I do know that I have the tools, to make that happen. Now, I think isn't saying that you are that and on a personal level, of course that's true, and not saying that, oh, I'm feeling depressed tomorrow. Well, you might be depressed the next day and whatever, but you also have to do some stuff to make that stuff happen. Like
mm-hmm,
I have to make a piece of art work, for instance, I have to spend time doing it. I have to learn how to do things. I have to do that to try and not be depressed because I go through that too. You have to do some personal care. You have to do some things to make it not happen. So it's not like, tomorrow is always going to be a brighter day. There are things you have to do to help do that, but there's the
yeah,
possibility it can be a brighter day if
yeah.
you do some certain things to prep for it.
Yeah. And that possibility increases the more
Yeah.
that you, yeah, do that. I
Yeah.
love that. So if you guys are new to either of us, did you have anything else you wanted to share about
No,
solstice, Michael?
I think we
Okay.
pretty much covered everything that we
Yeah.
were covering.
I always love chatting with you. If you guys are new to either of us, I just wanted to mention we both have a lot of classes on our websites if you're interested in exploring our version of creativity. My website is stephanieleeart.com and Michael's is
Nope,
michaeldemangeart.com.
michaeldeMeng.com. Just michaeldeMeng.
michaeldemange.com.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying. StephanieLee.com wasn't available. So
Yeah, you
I
gotta
had
be
to do
quick.
that, had to add the art. Yeah. So there's some really fun stuff there for anybody if you're looking for some fun learning, but also more pontificating on our creative practice and our creative process, specifically with regards to materials and stuff. But I know Michael's got a class coming up in registration opens really soon in January, I think.
Correct. Yep. Heart
Yeah.
centers. Yeah.
And I'm working on some original art. I don't have any new classes on the horizon, but I've got probably about a dozen in my website library, so lots to choose from. But I do have some new art coming up in the next couple of months. So both of us are putting to practice what we're talking about here in our own way. And, just really want to encourage, I know it's true for me, and I believe it to be true for Michael, that as much as we know that like we're each doing our creative work and our artwork, but I think we both really have a heart for wanting other people to feel like they can do that too if they want to. And so this is at the core of this is a message of encouragement, to do whatever you need to do to feel like you can connect with some sort of creative flow even when it feels like a dark night of the soul.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think that I think that in a lot of ways, both you and I have worked with people through the years, and just how much people gain from art. We've, worked with so many different people, and how much art has changed them in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying it's not frustrating to do and doesn't have hard times, but I think it's crucial. I think it's a
I
crucial
agree.
aspect of existence. But
I
we
agree.
will have this, just to let everybody know, we will have this available on our respective YouTube channels.
Mm-hmm.
I will stop recording when we were done, and you'll be able to, if you came in late or whatever and want to see the whole thing, and you could rewatch it every year. It could be like
Every
Christmas Story,
solstice.
watching Christmas Story every year. You could put it on your holiday Christmas movie list. Stephanie and
Yeah.
I talking about the solstice. But
Yeah. And we will probably have more of these discussions in the future. We've done a
yeah,
few on Instagram Live over the past year that have been really good that I'm trying to get downloaded to share on YouTube. I'm having some technical issues with that, but if you guys want to stay in the loop, stay in the loop.
yeah. No better way to stay in the loop than to stay in the loop.
Agreed.
All right, gang.
Thanks,
Um,
everybody.
Happy solstice, however you choose to celebrate. I'm gonna go burn some stuff, maybe.
Sounds good.
I'm gonna make
Maybe I
birria
will
tacos and
too.
burn stuff.
Don't burn the tacos.
No, I'm not gonna burn the tacos. No.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
All right, see you guys. Bye, Stephanie Lee.
Bye, Michael May.
Okay. Ciao, ciao, ciao.